episode for July 27th, 2025.
And smash that subscribe button.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. It's your host, Brent Bilski, a.k.a. Double B, or the 110 Soldier. Today, I'm focusing on one issue, the WNBA, and I'm going to call this Pay Us What You Owe Us for Dummies. After the WNBA All-Star Game, most people know now, they all came out pre-game with the shirts that said, Pay Us What You Owe Us. And just like that, the internet lost their damn mind. Suddenly, everybody's a labor economist. Some people are saying, that's right, give them NBA money. Others are yelling back, they don't bring any revenue. How dare you? So today's episode is once again, Pay Us What You Owe Us for Dummies. Understanding what's fair when it comes to the WNBA and what they should be paid issue that seems to have the entire internet in a whole storm. So I'm going to break this down clearly, calmly, factually for everyone else who's tired of the shouting and tired of the BS. What are the actual things you need to know? And it's a lot because it's a complicated situation, but I'm going to focus on 5 things. For one, what are the actual fair arguments for raising WNBA salaries in 2025 and their new CBA? There are some good ones, and I'll let you know. Is the NBA and the NFL, or any men's league in general, a good comparison model for the WNBA to make arguments, and why not? There's also, in those comparisons to NBA and NFL, one big thing that happened in those leagues that could raise salaries, but if it happened to the WNBA, it could blow up the league entirely, and I'll tell you how that directly involves one Miss Caitlin Clark. Also, the new catchy argument, the 50-50 revenue split. That slogan is not as simple as it sounds or even possible. There is a big elephant in that room when it comes to ownership that is unique to the WNBA that I have to explain. And then finally, the big money shot, pun intended, what is a realistic, sustainable pay model? What could it look like, and what is fair, and what could the WNBA earn in this new CBA? What would those numbers actually be? I have 2 solutions. The first one is better. They'll never go for it. But the second one is probably more along the lines of what you should expect and what they should actually say is a reasonable, fair raise for the WNBA. So a lot to cover. And just to be clear in this, where I stand, I just want to let people know who have never seen me before. I root for the WNBA. I do believe they deserve a raise, in my opinion, within reason. They can occasionally be the most also insufferable and annoying athletes on the planet, but even though they get on my nerves, and I've warned them about this before, I still love basketball. I still love a lot of the stars in the WNBA. I do think they deserve a raise. So just to kind of clarify, this won't be a hit piece. This also is going to be a pep rally. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. I'm going to answer all these questions as simply and enjoyably as I can, and by the end of this, you can go back to the internet and argue fairly what is right and what is wrong when it comes to paying the WNBA players. All right? Good, great, grand, wonderful. Let's get into it.
Good, great, grand, wonderful.
We'll get on with it then.
The first thing we need to get into is what are the actual fair arguments? What are the ones that actually make sense when it comes to the WNBA getting higher pay in their new contract? Because they should get paid more, even though the league is losing money. So I'm going to rank them again from bottom to top. So let's start with the first one. And it's not a terrible one, even though it's the weakest one for me, is the revenue participation. Only 9% of the revenue is what the players get from the WNBA. 9% is legitimately shitty. Like, that is not good. 9% of a revenue split is ridiculous. It's a logical starting point, but it's also flawed without context, because even though the total pie is small, you know, the players do generate a lot of this revenue and really are responsible for the revenue. In the end, they're what we come to see. So shouldn't they get more than 10% when you consider, by comparison, the NBA gets 50%, the players do, of league revenue. The NFL and MLB get anywhere from 48 to 50%. MLS even gets 25%. So again, 25%, 48 to 50%, 50%, and somehow the WNBA is only getting 9% currently of league revenue. That's comically low.
That's not enough.
But the thing is, it's 9% of nothing.
50% of something is better than 100% of nothing.
And so that's why that's an easy one to respond to. The WNBA, as most people know now, a lot of people didn't know this a year ago, but I think almost everyone else knows now, has not made a profit in any year of its 29-year existence. So it is a tough time, even if things are going well, to ask for a raise when the pie technically to split is 0%. But 9% is pretty embarrassing. The next argument that is worth getting into, and also does involve the 9% revenue thing, is the startup investment argument. Basically, the idea that, okay, yes, they're not making money yet, but this is like a startup investment for the NBA, and many companies took decades to profit, not just the WNBA. This is a logic that actually holds up. Pay ahead of profit because you believe in the future. And this is actually true for most of the big names you've heard of. Apple, Amazon, Tesla, even Netflix. They lost money not just for years, but for decades, and they had to invest in their talent, their infrastructure, and product along the way. Amazon, just FYI, lost money 14 of its first 20 years. Tesla posted 15 years straight of net losses before profit. Netflix has just recently started making money, and they burned cash again for decades and have only recently sustained profits. So the logic says, be like a startup, build now, win later, give the people that deserve it their money. If the NBA views the WNBA like a startup, this argument makes sense. Invest in the products, the players before the boom hits.
You got to spend money to make money.
One of the big responses I would give to that, just to be fair, Tesla, Netflix, and Amazon also had a much bigger ceiling and have now hit it, so it's kind of an unfair comparison. To give you an idea, if you combined Amazon, Tesla's, and Netflix's profits just from 2024, they combined for $775 billion. As much as I root for the WNBA, I don't think they're going to come anywhere close to $200 to $300 billion profits when even the NBA is bragging about a $10 billion revenue that they get annually. So this is something that, yes, did these companies invest and continue to invest for decades and let it have to have its revenue eventually come up decades later? Sure, but they also were thinking down the line, eventually we're not just going to get paid, we're going to get paid in the hundreds and hundreds of billions. I think best case scenario, the WNBA in the next 10 years would be happy to be worth $1 or $2 billion, which is literally like, 1% of what those other companies did. So comparing the model is fair, but using those names just for clout is kind of annoying because the ceiling is not the same. The next argument I think that is worthy of mentioning is the optics. And it's not my favorite, but it's kind of true. When you look at a $10 billion organization, you're not just a $10 billion a year company now. You're one of the wokest leagues in all of sports, period.
You're like so woke.
I mean, the NBA cares, the Social Justice Coalition, they were very supportive of the kneeling of the anthem and all the other things. They have always been very socially aware, and then the court of public opinion, it does make for a rough comparison when you're the parent company and you're paying your top star in the men's league now, an SGA, $71 million per year. And on the other side, on the women's side, Caitlin Clark, who is very much a star in her own right, is only making $78,000. That is, again, her rookie contract. But still, $71 million, $78,000. One of these things ain't just like the other. The NBA prints $10 billion a year right now in revenue, and the women are still just fighting to stop flying commercial and are making anywhere from $70,000 to $80,000 a year. It just looks bad, and this is a fun fact. Even if the NBA added $200 million in subsidy, that is still only 2% of their annual revenue, and it would double the WNBA's entire salary pool. I'll repeat that. If the NBA just gave up 2% of their revenue, another $200 million, if they wanted to, and most companies at that level do donate at least 2% to a charity or some sort of social cause, if they were just to give that away, it would double the amount of money the WNBA could split in the player pool to pay off these players. So with the optics of that, it just doesn't look great, does it? It doesn't look good that one side's making $71 million, the other one's only making $70,000. 2% would double their revenue. It's not my favorite one, but when you really compare the two, you go like, Jesus Christ, $71 million to $78,000. Is pretty significant. Not to mention, if you put Caitlin and SGA in two separate arenas, I think you would have a hard time picking which fan base who's going to actually show up more. Meaning, like, I think Caitlin could actually draw just as much or more than the NBA MVP right now, and she's getting paid $70,000 to $71 million. It is crazy. It is bad optics, especially for a league that wants to promote the Gen Z, young women, socially conscious fans. It's kind of a no-brainer that it just doesn't look great. Here's the best one outside of the next one I'll get to that's more detailed for why they deserve more money, is that they really do have real measurable growth now. This is no longer, it's still very one-star driven, I'll give you that, but they are earning their pay raise argument. This isn't a bet just on the future anymore. It's kind of a reflection on the present. In 2024, they had their highest attendance in 26 years. Television ratings are up 200%. They have the most sold-out games in league history last year. Expansion teams are now worth $250 million a pop, and they're getting multiple. There's going to be multiple expansion teams coming in at $250 million a team. Y'all said grow the game, and then eventually we'll pay you more. They have. Maybe it's time to pay up. I mean, not all pay raises are about profit. Some are about promise. But for the first time ever, the WNBA has real momentum. They have real metrics, and they have a real case. So the players aren't just asking for some charity, they're actually earning a raise. This next one, and this is a big one, and I wanted to isolate this to itself. This is the new favorite one-dimensional argument that makes sense when you hear it at first, but if you peel back the layers of this onion, actually has a lot more to it. Well, the NBA and the NFL didn't make a profit for decades. This is the one you're going to hear continually people repeat, that the NBA and the NFL, quote, lost money for decades before they made a profit. The WNBA's only been around 29 years. Shouldn't you compare the WNBA to the NBA and the NFL, who, again, lost profits for years? And it is absolutely true. We have to mention this. They both were unprofitable for decades. The NBA did not actually turn a profit until the 1990s. Many teams were losing money until the 2000s. The NFL also struggled financially until the late 1960s before the AFL merger and national TV deals. But they also both almost died multiple times. They almost died twice. That is a big difference. The fact is, neither one of those leagues have ever had a safety net. That is a huge difference, and you're missing a lot of context when you try to compare that argument to the WNBA model just by the time spent and the profit not yet made. The NBA and NFL didn't have a safety net. They weren't being kept alive by a $10 billion subsidized parent company. The NFL did not have a sugar daddy funding their operations. They had to sink or swim on their own. There was no ESPN. There was no NBA infrastructure. There was no guarantees. There was no subsidies. There was no nothing. When the NBA or NFL lost money, those teams actually died. The NBA, over its time, has lost multiple franchises that I swear to God are real, and I promise you never heard of. Teams like the Anderson Packers, the Sheboygan Redskins, the Waterloo Hawks, and the Chicago Stags are all real teams from the NBA that folded way back in the 1950s. In 1976, just before the ABA-NBA merger, the league was down to 17 teams and was really almost bankrupt now versus the $30 and $10 billion revenue. The NBA Finals in 1979-80 were on tape delay. The arenas were often half empty. The NBA, because they had no one else to go to, almost went out of business if it wasn't for Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. NFL, very similar story. They almost collapsed in the 1950s. Did y'all know that the Houston Texans are not the first Texans? There was actually a Dallas Texans that folded after just one season in 1952. Other teams you never heard of, like the New York Yanks and Brooklyn Dodgers, either dissipated or relocated. And so very similar to the NBA, there was no one paying off their checks. When those teams didn't make money, those teams went away. And another important note, when people want to bring up the olden times of the NBA and NFL, I think it is almost impossible to not bring this part up. They had to work jobs outside of the NFL or NBA that they played in. The WNBA likes to bitch and go, oh, well, we got to play overseas and we got to do this. Back in those days, if you want to use them as a comparative model, those stars had to go pump gas. Like, there was literally one of the guys that plays for the Bears, like Nagorski or something back in the 50s, was a Hall of Fame player. When he wasn't in the NFL, he had to go pump gas to pay his checks and be able to pay his rent and his bills. So miss me with this direct comparison idea. It's really just not a fair one, because when you contrast this to the WNBA, where teams were folding and teams you never heard of, like the Packers, the Sheboygan Redskins, the Waterloo Hawks, or the Dallas Texans, when they just went away, teams like the Mystics, teams like the Dream, who have struggled, they get supported. WNBA has had 28 years of consistent guaranteed survival. No matter what, the NBA will cover their losses. The NBA is constantly propping up this league in a way that the NFL and the NBA never had. Also, to go back to that same comparison when people try to use it, oh, the startup for Netflix, Tesla, they didn't make money either. I will again repeat, I think they knew that the NFL and NBA had a much higher ceiling, and that has now come to fruition. I don't think that WNBA, as much as I like them, could ever touch what the NFL or NBA does numbers and metrics wise. For one, there's a difference between SJWs and supporters, but in general, women don't really get down on sports the way men's do. It's just kind of the fact of what it is. But when you look at like the Super Bowl, so yes, the NFL, the owners, they kept pumping money into it for years, but now they get over 100 million viewers on average since the 2010s. The NBA Finals has been down recently around 13, 14, 15 million. Back in the 90s, they were 20 to 35 million viewers. The WNBA, even in its historic rise, has never sniffed anything close to even 5 million. Matter of fact, the best they've ever gotten is around 3.5. That was for last year's All-Star game with a peak at 4.4. And regular season games, get down to like 1 or 2 million at best, and that's the most that they can ever expect. That WNBA Finals was somewhere around 1 million. They're not going anywhere near the 100 million or the 35 million that the NFL or NBA did. So bonus point, I think, is worth mentioning. You want to compare these models. I think everyone also knew because of the support system, they had a much higher ceiling. And this is the big one. If you want to go into what caused, and yes, those leagues did pay their players more than WNBA players get paid now. The big reason that happened, and this is going to be a big part of the conversation, they had competition.
Whatever they're paying you, I'll double it.
Competition is what actually made those contracts, the ones that people like to talk about when they point them out in the NBA and NFL, go up. The NBA eventually had the ABA. The NFL had the AFL. These were full rival leagues that didn't just poach stars. They inflated the salaries when they poached these stars. The AFL back in 1965, just to give you an example, paid Joe Namath at the time $427,000. That was the highest ever rookie deal at that point. The ABA offered these insane deals to players like Dr. J and George Gervin. Julius Erving is the most famous one. He got a $500,000 plus contract in the early 70s, which was considered a fortune at the time, and almost put the NBA out of business. The NBA eventually had to merge with them to bring those guys back. But it was forced salary increases, not because of fairness, but because of leverage, because of competition. The WNBA has never had to worry about that because they've been paid for until now. Yes, we've had the overseas leagues, but ask Brittany Griner how that can go for you.
He's in jail.
But if Unrivaled can succeed and compete for Caitlin Clark's services and create a real bidding war, or Asia Wilson or one of the bigger stars, that could maybe put the pressure on WNBA to raise their salaries. But right now, without real big competition like the NBA had the ABA or the NFL had the AFL, it's just not the same model to compare to say, oh yes, when they weren't making money, they still paid their players. They didn't want to. They were forced to because a rival league might have poached them away. So to repeat, yes, did they also both lose money for decades? Absolutely. By the way, they also both nearly collapsed. NBA in the late 70s was down to 17 teams. The finals on tape delay. They had drug scandals, failing attendance, bankruptcy concerns. NFL in the early 50s, several teams actually folded mid-season. You had NFL teams fold in the middle of the goddamn season sometimes in the 50s. And they had zero national TV contracts. The leagues was largely regional. It was like this city here, this city there. So yes, the NBA and NFL weren't profitable either, but they almost didn't make it. They didn't have corporate sponsors. They didn't have billion-dollar backers. They didn't start off day one with cushy ESPN and ABC deals. They didn't have a parent league subsidizing them. They had competition that inflated those salaries, and they had real threats to survival that forced the action. These teams had to survive on their own. The WNBA has survived with a life jacket and is still asking for like yacht money. So it is not the same when you put those two arguments together. Now, the good news in that whole competition argument is also the bad news. So let's say Unrivaled, which started last year, continues to rise and do well. The only problem with that is that that could alone put the WNBA out of business, because if they do something like the ABA or the AFL did and they poach the star, right now there's only one star that could truly decimate any WNBA hopes in the future. The Caitlin Clark factor and the one arms race that basically that would be, it would be over to whatever league she switches to. She truly is the star. If a league was able to poach Caitlin Clark right now, the WNBA would be screwed. Unrivaled has everyone else on their rosters, and they have all sorts of push and all sorts of attention. Stars like Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, Angel Reese, and Caitlin Clark still by herself draws more than all of them combined. Fever versus Sky, 2.25 million viewers. Unrivaled, their average ratings was 221,000, 10%, with all the other stars of what Caitlin Clark got in a regular season game. It's not just fan interest. That is an absolute broadcast multiplier.
She is the one.
Caitlin brings the sponsors, the ad dollars. She's it. She really is. And it's not about talent. It's about the star, the it factor, whatever you want to call it. For whatever reason, she has the world's attention. She is the one. The only ones that I could compare this to would be like WWE and WCW, bringing up wrestling. Back when WCW stole Hulk Hogan from WWE, that was a huge shift in the wrestling world. This would be the equivalent of PGA versus Live right now, but instead of Brooks Koepka being the big kind of get, imagine if Live Golf was able to steal Tiger Woods in his prime. That is really the level of what I'm talking about. If the ABA was able to take Michael Jordan, like say the ABA was around in 1996, that is the level of like, it could really, as much as you want competition, God forbid, they get smart and they poach the one star that they would need, it would completely topple your organization and the WNBA would go bye-bye. So you may want competition until it shows up and it poaches your star. The only other question would be, how much money would it cost?
$100 billion.
What would it cost if a rival league came in and said, look, we're going to put Caitlin Clark and we're going to surround her with a bunch of college players or whatever. We're going to figure it out, but we want Caitlin Clark. We're going to invest all our money. What would it probably take to steal her? And you would have to think about, too, it's not just what she's worth, but what it would cost to pull her away because the sponsors would follow her. They're not going to stay loyal to the WNBA, Nike, Gatorade, everything else. She's the one. She would bring all the ratings. You would probably have to do estimated $10 to $15 million salary, which would be similar to mid-tier NBA at least, considering all the way she's moved the viewership, merchandise, ticket sales across multiple markets. That would be 10 times her current pay, and in my opinion, still a bargain at $10 to $15 million. You'd also have to probably give her equity stake. And that is becoming more common now. This is not an uncommon request. I believe even Caleb Williams was rumored at one point asking for this equity stake of 2 to 5% would make sense if you tried to poach Caitlin, which would be similar to Lionel Messi in the MLS and Major League Soccer. Because, dude, she's not just a player. She would be the reason teams would invest. She's the reason the upside would be coming up and driving. She's becoming more common. This type of stuff's becoming more common in entertainment deals. Rihanna with Fenty, LeBron with Spring Hill. So if you wanted to poach Caitlin, it would set a new precedent of contracts, which would be great overall eventually for WNBA or any other professional women's league because other people would eventually want to get paid like Caitlin does and at least may have the argument to do so. But if you ask me right now, what would it cost? I would say $10 to $15 million and at least 2 to 5% of your entire equity in your league to pull her away, which would be holy crap. That's probably what that would take there. So, moving on. And this is one of the biggest ones. Everyone is ignoring this big and unique fact about the WNBA that is really only applied to them, this 50-50 dilemma. Why don't they split the revenue? They don't have 100% of their revenue to split. I don't think even people that work in this field for a living seem to either recognize, know, or pay enough attention to this fact.
We are not going to talk about this.
Why aren't we talking about it?
This is the big elephant in the room when it comes to the 50-50 dilemma of people screaming, well, the WNBA should be paid like the NBA, who gets 50-50 revenue split. In Major League Baseball and NFL get 50-50 revenue split. Why, oh why, doesn't the WNBA get 50-50 revenue split? The biggest problem is that the WNBA doesn't even own 50% of the league itself. Let's get into what happened here, because people keep, like I said, share 50%, share 50%. Share what? The NBA, NFL, and MLB are all 100% owned by their team owners. 100% of their league is owned in a collective of their team owners. The WNBA only owns 42% of its own league. How did that happen?
How did you ever screw up so bad?
So in early years, the WNBA was completely subsidized by the NBA, but losses mounted. This is a few years ago. It wasn't going well. Expansion slowed. They needed fresh capital to survive. So instead of folding and getting rid of teams like the NFL used to do back in the day, or just slashing player pay like the NBA used to do back in the 50s and 60s, they did a startup style decision and said, we're going to sell some equity to survive. Other leagues didn't do this because, again, NBA, NFL didn't have a parent company to sell 42% of the league to, which is now what the NBA owns. But they were also allowed to fail and go away, something the WNBA model, due to optics and other reasons, has never been allowed to do. But if you look at the actual ownership breakdown of the WNBA versus every other league that y'all want to compare revenue splits to, everyone else, again, owns 100% of their league. NFL, NBA, NHL, they all own their league. Only 42% of the WNBA is owned by the actual team owners, and 16% was given to outside investors. This was just happened around 2022 during a capital raise. So to repeat, 42% is owned by the WNBA. Another 42% is owned by the NBA owners, and 16% is actually given to outside investors. This was done in 2022. So that means that 58% of the WNBA's league decisions, revenue, profit potential are all controlled by non-WNBA entities. So when fans or players say give them 50%, there isn't 50% to give.
50%. Over 50%.
It's like working at a company when your CEO just owns 40% of the stock and you say, I want to raise. It ain't that simple. He's got to go ask a board. He's got to ask investors. He's got to ask the parent company. This is not a decision that is just so simple as doing what everyone else does. They don't have the situation that everyone else does. And the bigger problem with all of that in this revenue split is now, thanks to their growth and thanks to them doing so well, they're too expensive to buy back. Let's just focus on the 16% that was given away in 2022. Just picture Shark Tank. I think most people have pictured Shark Tank. So just imagine it's 2022. WNBA walked into the set of Shark Tank and did the whole little pitch, came in with their smiles and shit and said, hi Sharks. We're the WNBA. We're a passionate women's league, and we're struggling to stay afloat. We need some capital, survive, and grow. So Mark Cuban said, all right, what the hell? Along with I know the NBA is 42% of your league, I will buy 16% of your league for $75 million, evaluating your league at that time at $475 million, because at the time, teams were worth around 10 to 20 million. It was a good move at the time, 2022. It made sense. They were a startup. Equity was their only currency, so they took the money and ran. But now fast forward to 2025, and they want to buy that 16% back from Mark Cuban. It don't work that way. Franchises are now reportedly valued and sold at $250 million. When Mark Cuban bought them from Shark Tank example, they're only worth 10 or 20. So now you want to buy back that 16%, you have to pay at least 10 to, I would argue, 20 times more that $75 million initial investment. You can't just undo it. You have to buy them back at today's prices, which I promise you that the WNBA has no ability to afford whatsoever now or in the near future. So why doesn't the WNBA operate like the NBA? Because they don't own the damn league. The NBA owns 42%. VCs own 16%. They only own 42%. It is a structural ownership issue. So when you try to say, let them eat, they sold at least 58% of the kitchen. It ain't that simple. Stop using the NBA as an argument. It is an entirely different ownership situation. I don't know why this hasn't been brought up more, because to me, this is the biggest holy crap kind of part of the whole thing. They only own 42% of the league. So, before I get to the final kind of finale here of the pay, what should WNBA actually get? What is a fair contract? I am leading up to that. I have to give you this one. What should we look to as a model? Because they're so obsessed. Everyone that makes this argument is so obsessed with pointing at the NBA, NFL, everyone else, like I pointed, for multiple reasons. That doesn't make any sense. So what is a league? And I'm going to do a men's league that the WNBA could be compared to that actually makes a lot of sense. Major League Soccer. Major League Soccer, the MLS, because I'm trying to really just separate from this whole it's a woman thing and da-da-da-da-da. MLS, to me, not NBA or NFL, is a much better benchmark for comparison. Again, they're both growing, truly kind of niche leagues, at least in the United States. They were both founded within a year of each other. They're both around the same age. MLS was formed in 96, WNBA the very next year in 1997. So they're both on the same age-wise trajectory here, and they're both highly dependent on one damn person.
Without them, I'm nothing.
They both have one megastar that basically attracts all the casual fans that they are relying on for their growth currently until they can build the other stars around them. Caitlin Clark and Lionel Messi are so similar in the amount of just their gravitational pull that they bring in. This is why, to me, it's really the fairest comparison. Caitlin Clark doesn't just raise attendance everywhere she goes. She completely transformed the WNBA. On average, it's 3 to 5 times more viewership. All-Star Game was just down, 36, 40%, something like that, and they were bragging about it. Lionel Messi is maybe more. as far as an impact in just one person to one league. He single-handedly basically gave them the Apple TV and MLS subscription raise that they have now. He's created sellouts everywhere he goes. They call it like Messi Mania when he shows up. He made Inter Miami the most watched MLS team of all time. So again, without Caitlin, WNBA is somewhere between 500,000 to 200,000 viewers versus at least 1.1 to maybe 3 to 3.5 million, depending on the game that involves Caitlin Clark. Without Messi, MLS games go from anywhere from 250,000 to 300,000 viewers versus, again, millions guaranteed. Attendance goes from an average of 9,000 to 20,000 if you can fill it in the WNBA. MLS, without Mr. Messi, goes from 22,000 to like 60 to 80,000, depending on the stadium. Both leagues are growing fast, but it's very similar because both is being lifted by just one damn person. And also their salaries are similar. That's another reason I think it's fair before I give you my projection of what I think the WNBA should make. If you look at their comparison in salaries, MLS minimum is 65, WNBA is 67,000. Now, MLS has a little bit of a higher salary in average at 500,000 versus the 116 of the WNBA, but there is a huge difference that I do need to kind of discuss real fast before I get into the next part of the pay structure, what I think is available for the WNBA, as MLS is very, very similar, except for one big exemption, pun intended.
One big difference.
It's called the designated player option. MLS has a designated player option which says that with each team, one star is completely removed from the cap. So to quote the kids, there's no cap. There's no cap with one of your stars. So when you look at Miami and Messi, they pay everyone else. Like I said, you get anywhere from 65 to 500,000 depending on the player you are. Messi, though, gets $20 million a year versus the minimum of 65,000 because, again, there is no salary cap for Lionel Messi in the designated player option. $20 million is actually more than 20 of the 2019 payrolls in MLS. And he's worth every damn penny, as I pointed out. He's actually probably being underpaid for the amount of eyeballs and the necessity that he is to that league. So if the WNBA was to do something like this, I think it would be very interesting because Caitlin would have to at least command 2 to 5 million just to start off easy. And then stars behind her like Asia and Angel and Paige could probably get at least $1 million, maybe up to 2, depending on how they wanted to treat them on their teams with a designated player option. But I don't think the WNBA as a whole would actually want that model, and I'll get back to it in just a little bit. But like I said, if we're looking for a league to compare them to, stop bringing up the NBA, stop bringing up the NFL. They really have nothing to do with it historically. The way they do it, their pay structures, ownership, it makes no damn sense. If you want to go somewhere, go to MLS. They're about the same age. They're 29 and 30 years old. They both are fighting for relevance in the United States against the Big Four, and actually they are doing better overall, but still pay somewhat similar minimum salaries. They have 5 times the revenue, $1.4 billion to around $250 million for the WNBA. So the WNBA isn't even the MLS yet, but I do think that's the fairest pay structure, looking at, again, the one-star heavy, where they sit, what ratings they get, what they pay, yada, yada, yada. So let's at least keep that in mind, that I'm going to probably stick to Major League Soccer before I compare them to anything else. So, drum roll. This is probably what a lot of people have been like, dude, let's just get to the point here. What is an actual fair projection? What does fair pay for the WNBA actually look like? So I'm going to call this the money shot.
Here comes the money shot.
And I had to go through all the other stuff to kind of build to this point. What do I think fair pay should look like in the WNBA? I got two solutions. One that actually makes sense that they'll never go for, and the one they would probably have to go with, and the numbers they would project. So what's realistic? What's sustainable? What's fair? Talking math one more time. NBA does a 50-50 revenue split. As we've explained, WNBA only owns 42% of their entire league, and their total league revenue is $250 million versus $10 billion. If they did the one that I think they should do, comparing them to Major League Soccer, if they did a designated player rule, just like MLS, where they allowed 1 star per team to have no salary cap, this is the model I think you could see that would make a lot of sense. Caitlin Clark would probably get, starting off, $5 million a year. Stars behind her, like Asia Wilson, I think it would be a fair argument to say that Asia deserves at least 2.5. Sabrina, Brianna, maybe at around that level, and girls like Angel and Paige Beckers would probably get $1 to $2 million in a no cap rule or a designated player rule. Everyone else, though, would be under a controlled cap system at a $100,000 minimum, and this way you could pay the stars and still protect the growth and parity of the league. So again, there would be one player per team that could get anything that they want to pay them, basically what they think they're worth. I think Caitlyn would get somewhere around $5 million. You would get Asia and them around $2 million. Minimum salaries would be somewhere in the $100,000 range. The average salary would still be up. It would still go up to like $200,000 to $250,000. The max salary for your non-DP star would be something around $400,000 to $500,000. And again, your big star would be uncapped. Anything goes. The problem with this, and the reason I know you'll never go for it, even though it actually is a great model and Major League Soccer has really made this work, and it really does hamper anyone because they love to throw out the Caitlyn contract. They love to go, well, Caitlyn only makes 75. Caitlyn only makes 75. Caitlyn only makes 75. This would be a way to fix that. But if we're keeping it a buck, the problem is you cannot get the entire WNBA to agree to this because they're very jealous and they're very petty.
I can't stand her.
Not that all pro athletes don't want their money, but I think worse than other leagues, the WNBA has proven to be jealous, they've proven to be petty, and they love to say things out loud like, we need more money and pay us what you owe us, and we, and us, and we. But I think we all know that when you say we, you really mean me.
I meant me.
And I don't think anybody would be anywhere cool with the idea that Caitlyn would be making like $5 million as much as she's not liked in this league, and then even people that got a raise and were making $200,000, $250,000 to $500,000, I think would still look evil-eyed at Caitlyn and be very pissed off. It's a great model. They'll never go for it. So what would be fair under the current structure? So this is really the one. After all the kind of looking and trying to understand and break shit down, this is, to me, the model that would make most sense. What do we actually think should be a fair pay raise with everything great going on in the WNBA? It would be based off a 25% revenue share with no designated player rule, no cap exemption, but they would not be able to share 50%. I do think they can bump things up to 25% split, which is, again, more realistic considering you only own 42%. You're still losing money, and the growth for your entire league is still very one-star dependent and is still very much in its early stage. So if you took 25% of $250 million in league revenue, you get a $62.5 million total player salary pool, and you can divide that amongst the 144 players, which means you could do a minimum salary average of now breaking six figures, $100,000 minimum salary. Average salary would be somewhere between $375,000 to $400,000 a year, and your top tier star, your Asia, your Caitlyn, your Paige, your Sabrina, whoever, is going to get anywhere from $1.2 to $1.5 million. So even with just a 25% revenue split, which I do think they could get up to, if you divided all that money, that means that everybody in the league will now officially make at least six figures, even the minimum. The average salaries would get bumped up to $375,000 to $400,000, and the top tier stars would at least break the $1 million barrier, something I think that is affordable, I think is fair, it lifts all boats, it stays proportional. So you can pick which one you want to go with. Those are my two solutions. I personally think, because people want to throw in the Caitlyn argument so damn much, and she really is Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods level of kind of bringing in all the attention, Lionel Messi in MLS. I like the idea of the no cap and just letting her get her 10, 20, whatever the hell they think she's worth paying her in millions, and watching the rest of them bitch and moan.
It's not fair. It's not fair.
Trying to, because everybody loves to say we, and we shall see if you would ever be down with that. But that actually makes more sense to me, to say she gets 10, you get, a raise, you get like 100, 150,000, but you're not touching what she brings in. No one's here to watch you. No offense. At least not yet. Do something. You got a ball. Do something with it. I don't think they would go for it. I think it would make more sense to go with the 25% revenue share split that's spread equally with salary caps amongst the league, which would start minimum salary 100. Average salary would now be bumped up to $375,000 to $400,000. Top tier star, $1.2 to $1.5 million. And another thing we could throw in, two other options I want thrown into this whole money CBA negotiation. How about you try to negotiate a short CBA? That would be an interesting kind of compromise between everybody. If the WNBA and management says, look, We don't know if this growth is sustainable. Right now, we see one girl basically driving the train. How about we sign a 3-year CBA at X amount of dollars and see how it goes? And would the WNBA be willing to do that and kind of risk and invest in themselves and say, good, because by the time 3 years showed up, we'd actually be worth even more and we'll be able to get even more money out of you. I think that would be an interesting side note solution to some of the problems here with total revenue. The other thing that I'm dying to see if it gets brought up in all of these contract negotiations, do you want to go 82 games? That's one of the big ones. Y'all keep loving to compare yourself to the NBA. NBA plays 82 games. You play like 40. You play like half. And I still listen to y'all bitch about how hard it is. Just the other day, they're playing the All-Star game. They're like, oh my God, we have to play All-Stars, and now we got to go play Monday. This is so hard. I'm tired. No. You play half of what the NBA plays in a season, and you still want to get higher and higher. Play more games. That's how you bring in more revenue. You want more ticket sales? Play more games. It'll be longer. It'll be tougher, but you get paid more. Bring that up another day. Last thing, and I want to call it a day.
One more thing.
There's one still overall thing that needs to be brought up, and it was reminded to me when I saw them kind of act the immature, silly way they did, wearing the pay us what you owe us shirt, which really I've made videos about bothered me, in the word using owe. Owe means to repay, or they are obligated. By definition, no one owes you a damn thing. And just the choice to do that in kind of the way they did it, it wasn't the look. It wasn't what was a good way to start conversation. And it reminds me, as you are going into your CBA in October and you're trying to make more money and you're trying to get fan support, the biggest lesson the WNBA still's got to learn is that negative attention does not equal process. Going viral is not the same as going forward. Not all attention is created equal. The WNBA this last week has been talked about a lot, maybe more than ever, and it's not good. It's controversy. It's culture wars. It's Caitlyn versus Angel. It's should they be paid this. It's race debates. It's gender debates. Just because people are watching a fight doesn't mean they're watching the game. Negative attention can create noise, but it doesn't always build value. Do you hear what I'm saying? This idea that just because the internet is talking about you, that it's a good thing, it doesn't mean the same thing. Just because the internet is having full of hot takes and arguments, it doesn't mean they're watching. How many people are actually tuning into the games instead of just arguing on the internet about stupid shit and irrelevant things that don't involve the actual game? To this day, I don't think 90% of the people actually know anything about who did what in that All-Star game. All everybody knows is the damn t-shirts. It's not reaction, it's retention. That's what you're looking for. This is not a mistake, by the way, that is made specifically by the WNBA, but they have been so far the most coddled when people don't want to tell them what they need to hear. But it is not unique to the WNBA. You've had other celebrities and athletes in leagues I can even use as example. You think of guys like Antonio Brown. People talked about Antonio Brown all the way to where he was, blackballed from the league. Jake Paul and his shtick is finally wore thin after the Mike Tyson fight. No one really cares or is paying attention. No one gives a crap about him anymore. He wasn't able to last. Kanye West, who's gone freaking insane. I think it's around when his mom died. But still, Kanye West is a perfect example of, man, he went somewhere between, hey, they're talking about me, it's a good thing, to, ain't no one rocking with you anymore, Kanye. Leagues, though, have followed this example. USFL and XFL. They were way more hype and nonsense and debate, clickbaity stuff than they ever were substance. Neither one of them lasted. Neither one of them have had any staying power. When you try to grow a league versus just what trends, you got to go away from viral clips. You got to go away from the arguments, the attention seeking, the drama. You got to get into focusing on game viewership, season ticket sales, broadcast deals, repeat customers. You can only live off controversy for so long. At some point, this product has to deliver, or I'm sorry, WNBA. Otherwise, you're just the Kardashians with a jump shot.
It's Kim Kardashian.
And I don't think that's what they want to be. I don't think when we look at the WNBA, they really want us to go, which is where a lot of people go sometimes, like, dude, this is a reality show. This isn't a league. This is the Kardashians with a jump shot. You have this idea that you're trending, that it's cool. Great. So did Kanye. If you want a league and you want to build something people want to come back to, not just argue about, you need to learn the lesson of not all attention is good attention. Negative attention doesn't always mean progress. All right, I got to go. You guys enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see, going forward, but hopefully this was at least for you. Now you can go back to the world with a full understanding of what it means. Pay us what you owe us for dummies. What exactly all this encapsulated. I know there was a lot to get into there. Hopefully I was able to explain it as simply and quickly as I could. Y'all have a good one. Talk to you next time. Bye.
And smash that subscribe button.